The opening shot of a scene has a close-up shot of the watch owned by Walter White. This has several meanings and reasons behind being the opening shot. First is it acts within the story, as all these killings must happen within a certain time frame, so Walt decides to measure it as he obviously feels that the tensions are high. However, it could also be viewed as being symbolic in multiple ways, such as it being an opening or indication for the music to begin, and as well as timing the deaths in the scene, times the non-diegetic sound being played. We then have a straight cut into an establishing shot of the prison, giving the audience an idea of how many inmates are in the location. This is also followed with yet another straight cut into showing us one of the inmates. They also use one of the inmates to walk in front of a shot. This is used several times as a transition to change the shot type, almost like an invisible zoom. This also yet again emphasises how crowded the locale is. These shots also follow a rule of thirds, with the inmate on the phone, keeping him on the left hand side for these shots. However, this rule is then broken with the inmate being central to the camera, which is usually used to direct the audience. Centralising the character in the frame creates the idea that the character is an important role and is in danger, which we later find out he was one of the prison targets. The character also panics by the hand gestures and body language he shows, contrasting this shaky and worried body language to an aggressive, rushed walking pace, indicating that an ambush is soon to come. We are then given the contrast between the assault going unnoticed to these violent acts, screaming and gruesome sound effects of an inmate getting stabbed to death. And this whole sequence is layered further with contrast, with the choice of a smooth jazz score being played. Although the lyrics resonate and are chosen purposefully for the plot, there is contrast given between the calming music and the intensive violent act being shown. The next following shots that feature in the second prison shows inmates walking down a long narrow corridor. This was also shot using a handheld shot, giving a more immersive look and possibly directing the idea that the camera is from the perspective of an inmate or guard of the locale. After this, the door shuts on, as we can tell through the facial expression and body language, the next prison killing. This is possibly the most effective shot at displaying an intensely gruesome scene, by the use of diegetic sound contrasting with a non-diegetic, with the same smooth jazz soundtrack, displacing with what is happening on the screen. Another thing that makes this one of the most gruesome parts in the scene is this hand. It gives the symbolism that the inmate is pleading for help and isn't going to survive. Another way they show that there is no escape is the pace of this shot, only taking up around a third of a second, giving it an almost jumpy way of frightening the viewer. This scene is also used as contrast between the next, possibly showing a binary opposition. Through this shot of Walter showing calmness in his face, in comparison to the brutality of the previous shot. After the calmness of Walter's facial expression, the shot cuts back to the previous prison, where yet another inmate is being killed. However, with this shot, the camera moves in synchronization with the bashing of the inmate's head, as well as the diegetic sound. This shot then cuts to a low-angle, medium shot with the collapse of the inmate, possibly symbolising the killing and fall of these suspects. This scene is also used to transition to the third prison and fourth death in the sequence. 46 seconds in, we are then re-shown the watch owned by Walter, reminding the audience that this is all happening within the same time period, and indicating that we are coming up to the halfway point of the killing. We then cut to a close-up, looking at an inmate walking off after staring at something. The camera then pans up to reveal what is going on within the prison cell via a mirror. This shot is an excellent example of how well done the cinematography is done in the sequence and Breaking Bad as a whole. 53 seconds in shows us a close-up of another inmate stepping in a puddle of blood. This indicates to the audience an act of killing and death, leading to the idea that another killing has been caused in the shower room, which in jails is stereotyped for abusive violence. The next shot is a pan, establishing Walter's house, and like earlier, contrasting with the previous violence distributed in the deaths in the prisons. We then cut to a close-up of Walter, looking down and contemplating something, possibly showing uncertainty, or indicating power by his posture and expression as fearless. Again, the watch is shown to show the passing of time and correlating with the shots, focusing on Walt. Like earlier in the sequence, we are given a handheld shot, acting as a jail inmate. The camera work also seems to continue to focus onto the background until transitioning to a dead prisoner, resting on a bench and panning to the blood dripping on the ground, obviously giving a visual indication of the murder. We are then given a medium close-up of yet another dead inmate sitting on the ground of a cell. This shot is very interesting in composition, however, as it very well executed the depth of the shot. as we see someone go from the foreground to the midground to the background. The shot also only has a very bland colour palette, with the only prominent colour being red from the blood. This unexpectedly highlights and focuses the blood as being the main part of the scene. Later in the sequence, at 1:22, we see Walt looking at his watch with an over-the-shoulder shot, which is commonly used in conversation between two people, which makes it, when the camera tilts up and Walt looking at his reflection, a lot more important, as it indicates him talking to himself, possibly symbolising the sanity of Walter. A general thing to mention is that there is a contrast in light between the scenes, in the jails as well as the scenes focusing on Walt. These scenes tend to be more cinematic in lighting, however the jail scenes tend to focus on realism when it comes to lighting, giving an almost poetic emphasis on the shots focusing on Walt.